Welcome to You Can't Say That in Court, a podcast by Rise Women's Legal Center. I'm Vicky Law.
And I'm Stephanie Melnick. We're your hosts in this conversation about survivors of violence navigating the BC family law system. We recognize that the system is colonial and it causes harm to families, which disproportionately affects Indigenous people.
By speaking more widely about these harms, we hope to raise awareness about the challenges survivors face as they navigate the colonial family law system. This podcast is our attempt to collectively identify the barriers and ask for positive changes to be made. Thank you for joining us. Our podcast series will discuss difficult topics such as gender-based violence and intimate partner violence, including physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, and financial abuse. Please be aware that this is a thread that is woven throughout all the episodes, and we hope that you will take care of yourselves however you need. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 19 of You Can't Say That in Court. And this is our last episode of season 1. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you stayed through all the way through episode 19, we will have season 2 coming out. I think around the springtime of 2026.
Yeah, that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah. So we still have a lot of content, a lot of discussions and conversations to share with you. So please stay tuned. But today we are going to talk about the report that was released by Dr. Kim Stanton. This report is called the Independent Systemic Review on BC's Legal System's Treatment of Intimate Partner Violence and Sexual Violence. And we wanted to end our season 1 with discussing this report because it summarizes a lot of the topics that we've covered throughout our podcast.
Yeah, and it is a really long report. It's extremely detailed. It's got some great analysis in it, but honestly, I found it very accessible. I found that Dr. Stanton had laid out using language that I think everyone can understand. I found it pretty accessible. I think the only thing that makes it harder to digest is just the length. But there is an executive summary that is really a lot easier to digest. But yeah, I hope lots of people read it because although it's intended for a government audience, it's definitely publicly available. And I think a lot of people will feel themselves reflected, their concerns reflected in what Dr. Stanton is mirroring back.
Yeah. And as always, we have the link in our show notes that links to the website on the BC government that talks about this report. And then we've also linked the direct report in the show notes as well. And you can always, if you don't have a lot of time to review it, like Stephanie said, there is the executive summary to go through.
Yeah, exactly. Go have a look.
Yeah. So let's start off with just talking about why does this report exist? Where did this come from? So the BC provincial government commissioned Dr. Stanton to take a look at the entire legal system that deals with sexual violence and intimate partner violence. And Dr. Stanton was tasked with trying to figure out why things aren't getting better, because I think we can all agree that things just aren't improving, despite the number of recommendations that have been made throughout so many years. So many recommendations have been made, and over a long period of time. And so it wasn't really to make new recommendations or repeat recommendations that have been provided previously, but really to look at why these recommendations, if they have been adopted, then why is it working, or what's preventing these recommendations from being adopted.
Yeah, and I think that's a refreshing piece of the report is that it's really amplifying existing recommendations, like you said, but then digging a bit further down into why they haven't been adopted, or maybe if they were, why aren't they working better than we thought that they would by now. And I think anyone who's even close to the social sector or the legal sector will understand or be familiar with just report after report with all these lists of recommendations of how to make things better. And it's very frustrating when they're not implemented because, yeah, they're just reports that gather dust as on a shelf, as people say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's not what we want. We don't want recommendations to just sit on a shelf and
no,
not
exactly.
be, whether it's implemented or thought about, considered, analyzed. Like we a lot of work has gone into the recommendations made by various groups and organizations. A lot of them are frontline organizations, nonprofit organizations. So we really also want to give a shout out to everyone who has been doing this work for so long. And sometimes it sounds like a broken record because I
Right.
know
Yeah.
folks say the same thing over and over
Yeah.
again for a long time.
Yeah. And even organizations and governments and yeah, authors from across the country. I know that when we are doing some of our research through Rise, we are always looking at what others are doing in other jurisdictions, and it is incredible some of the creative solutions that have been thought of in other provinces and territories. So, yeah, it's a lot of work. Let's make it. Let's at least implement the recommendations and see if they work.
Yes. And so as everyone can imagine, Dr. Stanton had a huge task. This was a
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
big, what is the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, it's
Machine
a
to
huge
take on.
scope. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a huge scope. Like all the issues with sexual violence and intimate partner violence coming through the legal system, and
Hmm.
it has so many layers to it because it's not just on the surface, like what our laws say. It's how the laws are implemented. It's how the people who implement the laws or who interpret the laws are thinking about those laws. It's how the
Hmm.
survivors are engaging with the system or deciding not to engage with the system. And why is that? Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And Dr. Stanton actually does a good job of including a lot of statistics that many of us have heard before, but then underlining that these statistics should be shocking, that we are kind of immune or have, I don't know, built up a resistance against the shock value or the I don't know, the deeply disturbing reality of what the statistics are reflecting. Um, so yeah, it's a huge scope of work that she was tasked to take on.
Yeah. That's a good point, Stephanie, because I hear the statistics often,
Oh gosh, we
right? Like,
recite them all the
yeah,
time. Yeah,
yeah. Maybe once a week, if not once every 2 weeks, I hear
right.
them, and it's not a shock factor to me anymore because I'm like, yeah,
No,
that is the reality.
right.
So it's important to remember like this shouldn't just be taken for granted, that we should be
Right,
concerned,
right,
that we should um everyone has like something to do in making
right.
it
Yeah,
better.
right,
Um,
right.
and there's so many system actors involved in the legal system that works with supporting survivors of sexual violence and intimate partner violence.
Mm-hmm.
Not only just the number of individuals, but the different types of system actors that we have that
Right.
support this process. So, um, and Dr. Sand recognizes that.
Yeah.
And she has separated this report out into two larger themes of recommendations. One is specific to the holistic system altogether, and there's
Right.
changes for that. And then she then focuses on the legal system change. So what can the legal system do to make it
Right.
better? Which obviously the legal system is part of the larger system as a whole.
Right.
But
But the
the
recommendations, yeah, that are specific to the legal system do have a bit of a different tone to them because one of the findings, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but just that there are already good laws and processes in
yeah,
place. It's just following them and digging down into how they're interpreted and how they're implemented. So yeah, I think although the legal system changes are part of the larger system, addressing the legal system issues specifically is really helpful.
yeah. And so the report has many recommendations, over
Oh, yes.
20 in the
Yeah.
report. We're not going to
And
be
they're
able
all
to do,
so good.
they're all
They're
so
all
good.
so good. Yeah.
We're not going to be able to do a deep dive into each and every one of them and give each and every one of them the time, and we're not able to do it justice. So
Right.
we're going to pick out a few of the ones that Dr. Stanton mentioned that relate to Rise's work. And also
Hmm.
relate to some of the things that we've talked about in the previous episodes. But before we do a deep dive, Stephanie and I just really, really want to thank Dr. Stanton for amplifying the work that Rise has done and shining light on our research and our work. And we're so very grateful.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm part of an ecosystem of change reading Dr. Stanton's report because it reflects back on some of the work we've done and the frustrations we've found, which also in turn reflects back on and is built on the foundation of other work that others have done in the past. And it feels like we're all trying to work together. And I don't think Dr. Stanton says that explicitly in the report, but I feel that vibe from the report that like we're all in this together. We all need to work together. Everyone has a part to play, and that's definitely kind of a tone that we've had in a lot of our work. That we're not doing it alone, but we are trying to connect to others and build on the work of others.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that leads greatly into the first recommendation, which is we're not in it alone. We're not doing it by ourselves. No
Hmm.
one person or organization or institution is doing it on their own. And there should be collaboration, which is a huge theme that we have talked about in previous episodes. Dr. Stanton identifies that there is siloing happening
Right.
between the ministries and the branches and the departments in when they're thinking of programs or supports for survivors. There isn't sharing of information with each other. There isn't enough collaboration with each other.
Hmm.
And we know that at Rise that violence does not happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen in silos.
Right.
The legal system isn't separate from, for example, housing, childcare, employment. We've talked about that before.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah, and
specific,
how,
yeah.
oh yeah, I was just going to say how survivors experience the legal system isn't siloed
Hmm.
either because their lives aren't siloed. And so having a system that is siloed doesn't work for those people who are trying to access some kind of remedy through a legal
Hmm.
system because that's not how life works for them. So yeah, I think that's a really great initial acknowledgement that collaboration and more blending will be very helpful. It's interesting though, because I definitely see how we got to where we are, and we've been working more closely with certain branches of the government, and it's been very eye-opening to see the number of people who A, understand that there's a problem, but B, aren't really sure how to break down the structures that they work in because they built themselves that way for a reason, that
Hmm.
not people can't take on the whole scope at once. They have to have a little piece of the puzzle to work on, and that's a full job unto itself. So the siloing is natural, and I mean this happens in private enterprise. It happens everywhere. Everyone's trying to break down the silos because we know that it needs to be more organic and interconnected. But it's natural to build those boxes to work within. We just need to be aware that they exist for a reason and not let them hem our work in. Um, yeah. So that yes,
Yeah,
getting back to your
that
point.
that's a good point because the problem is so big, and in order for it to be
Mhm.
manageable, there needs to be smaller pieces. Otherwise, it's just impossible, like this big thing to
Yeah.
overcome. And at the same time, it's like, how do we take a piece that we can work on and at the same time work with others to get towards the end goal?
Right.
And we've talked about that with our previous guests, Stephanie Hodgson and Melissa Paglis,
Hmm.
about just even the siloing in the different areas of law between
Right.
criminal and family law and immigration and family policing or child protection,
Hmm.
right? So
Hmm.
even if one person is navigating through all those areas of law and of those legal systems, that's still siloed from each other. And we've
Right.
talked about ways on how to collaborate with the different actors in each of those systems to make it better.
Yeah, yeah. And I do like all of the recommendations that are on that theme of collaboration because we've been talking about this for so long. I think we are, I mean, with you kind of starting the virtual legal clinic model of using collaboration as the basis was partly out of necessity, but of course also out of recognition that that works better for clients. Having lawyers
Mhm.
and support workers working together on a legal problem means it's very seamless to say, oh, yeah, well, there's a childcare issue or employment is unstable and the client needs to attend court. So, how are they going to get there that day? Transportation, it just kind of blends everything together really nicely so that the client has that wraparound support. But
Mhm.
also, just with a sheer lack of resources, collaboration makes sense because it makes sure that everyone's doing what they're good at without having to, like a support worker, having to dive deep into a resource online to figure out what's a certain family law process means or what does a certain hearing require. It ends up using our resources more effectively or more efficiently as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the best way to look at that is like if the goal is safety, which I think everyone agrees that the
I
goal
think
is
everyone
for
agrees.
safety,
Yes. Yes.
uh,
Yes.
safety and safety isn't siloed, right? Like
Right.
there isn't one way to get to being safe.
Right.
And so if we think about it that way, that there's multiple ways to achieve safety,
Mm-hmm.
and it depends on the circumstances, the timing, a lot of things. It's not possible for me as a lawyer to just be like, oh yeah, a protection order will provide someone safety. So let's just go
Mm-hmm.
after that and not think about the other pieces.
Right.
That's not possible. Um, for a myriad of reasons, which we'll
Right.
get into a little bit later. That's another
Exactly.
maybe 3 episodes long of reason.
Absolutely. But it is an interesting point because when someone, a survivor in particular, is basically always running their safety plan because they're
Hmm.
just, whether it's conscious or unconscious, they are making decisions to keep themselves and their children safe every day.
Absolutely.
There was a recent example for me of a woman who had changed addresses. So she'd moved to a new rental and really felt some additional safety with the abusive ex not knowing where she lived.
Mm.
But then by going to court for a protection order, the opposing counsel asked where she's currently living and she had to disclose her address. And so it's like that legal process just incrementally made her unsafer in that moment. And it just, yeah. So like you're saying, having those silos in place doesn't help. It needs to be more holistically acknowledged that, as you also said, safety being the goal, what can we do to maintain people's safety while still using the legal remedies that exist to enhance that safety? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of safety, there is a recommendation about courthouse safety. So the actual locations of court and what is safe or not safe about those places. And Dr. Stanton endorsed the recommendations that RISE had made in our previous report about the safety in courthouses. And Stephanie, I know that you are working on a project right now that touches on this. So maybe you
Yeah,
can expand a
oh
bit
yeah.
more.
Absolutely. I'm so excited because I mean, it's really nice to uncover some of the very structural and basic issues that make it unsafe to attend a court proceeding. So the physical space, the building, whether it's a courthouse or a community-based court location, that people are accessing, there are just a lot of issues with those. And our colleague Haley, who had originally authored the courthouse, the safety in BC courts report a couple of years ago, really was looking at the fundamental structure and how people are accessing them. But we're kind of picking up where she left off. And I'm excited because there's collaboration happening with branches of the government so that we can get into the details and looking at all the differences across the province. I think that was the biggest piece for me in looking at Haley's research was all the differences in how court is brought to a community. I mean, it doesn't even really get below the surface of some of the problematic and colonial issues with court processes. Just the physical locations across the province
Hmm.
are so different, and yeah, the government workers who are involved in the court system know this, but on one hand, they're kind of stuck with what they have, and on the other hand, want to make changes, but processes need to be carried out in a certain way. So, anyway, yes, there's an ongoing project right now that I'm really excited to talk about more. Maybe we can do that in season two, about what we
Yeah.
found and what can be done about it. But again, just underline this is really promising work that's being done because it is so collaborative with the government. And I do really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's great. And I just want to say, not only just the process of making changes, but like the financial barriers of making
Oh,
a
yeah,
change, right?
totally. Yeah.
That is a
Yeah.
huge undertaking, especially when you have the physical location of some places are much older.
Hmm.
And there needs to be financial resources to put in to improve it if that is a case. But I know that you're working on more cost-effective solutions
Right. We're starting at
to
the
improve.
start. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. What are the easiest things that will make the most impact? So, yeah, we'll talk
Yeah.
more about that, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. And the next recommendation that we want to touch on is, of course, money. Some
Yes.
changes can't be made without putting money to it. And this was to recognize that support workers are so important for
Hmm.
survivors' safety, and that there isn't enough funding for support
Right.
workers.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and we have a whole podcast episode on all the amazing work that support workers do to cover off the gaps. And I think uh, a recognition that more stable core funding is required was fantastic in Dr. Stanton's report. That's going to hopefully help improve wages and help improve working conditions, as we also
mhm.
highlighted in yours and my research in the Inclusive and Accessible Family Justice Report that we also have talked about on the podcast. Because it's just not fair that people doing such good work and being so flexible in how they cover off gaps that really are unique to different communities. So, for example, like a sexual assault outreach worker or a transition house worker or a court support worker in different communities, that job can look different depending on what that courthouse is like, what the resources are like in that community, and it's very specific to the community needs and super responsive. It's a great investment. If there is more ongoing funding, then support workers will probably be able to stay in their jobs longer if they're paid better or are paid for a full-time job, for example, because we know that there are support workers who put together like point 0.3 and point 0.2 and point 0.5 to make a full-time
Mhm.
job, and they have to switch between these different kind of scopes of work because the funding streams are different. If there was more core funding, then people will just become better and better at those jobs. And I think they'll be able to help improve the whole justice system because they will have more expertise and more insight and work towards problem solving instead of just reactively helping their clients. So, I mean, I really say it's an investment in the whole system if core funding is provided for support workers. Yeah,
Hmm.
they are such a key part to making the system work better.
Yeah. And I think it's a huge recognition about the importance of support workers, the trust that support workers have with survivors.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
usually the first point of contact for many survivors to reach out and have help for. It's
Yeah,
not the lawyer, not the judge,
right.
but usually it's reaching out to community organizations where there is that trust relationship being able to be built and that rapport.
Right. Yeah. And, the trust that we know exists with many support workers, I think, having been a victim service worker in a previous role, comes from not having to necessarily uphold every aspect of the legal system. There are lots of us who work in and around the system who do have a job, like lawyers are. Um, Required to uphold the existing system. But support workers are in a unique position of being able to be a little more honest, where they're like, yeah, sometimes it does make sense for your mental health and for your children's safety and for all these other reasons to not even engage in the legal system. So that unique position then in turn allows trust to build because it's being honest about the harms that a system could potentially do. And just on that topic, Dr. Stanton's report, the executive summary starts with a quote that I absolutely love, that it sets the tone for all of the work that it's a quote from a survivor saying, this is a teaser so that maybe our listeners will also be interested in going to read the report or the executive summary. But it's a survivor who says, I would never recommend another woman from going through this ordeal. Run, hide, and start over somewhere else. Like that's the first quote from a survivor
Mhm.
in this report. And I think that sets the tone for honesty about some of the harms that can be done. So, support workers are also in that unique position of being able to be honest about the harms. And that in turn puts them in a position to make real change and also encourage and support their clients to engage in a system that they don't necessarily trust. Yeah, which is, again, let's invest in the support workers.
Yeah, I think there's real power to acknowledging and just
Yeah.
saying outright the harms that exist instead
Yeah.
of skirting around the issue or saying, no, this is really um this will work or this will get
Right.
you what you want or need.
Right.
That's not helpful because as this entire report acknowledges and highlights that that's not always the case. The system is not
Right.
always successful in supporting
Mm-hmm.
survivors. And so
Right.
having someone to be like, yeah, this is actually not that great.
Right.
And then we can move past that and say, okay, how do we make it better?
Right.
Right?
And actually, that's what the government was saying in hiring Dr. Stanton in the first place and tasking her with this scope. They were acknowledging the reality that things have not been getting better and they want to know how to do better. And I think that deserves a lot of credit as well, because opening that
Yes.
or asking that question or opening up that can of worms is yeah, it's scary. And we know they're not easy fixes. So, yeah, huge credit for even asking the question in the first place.
Definitely. So we've talked a bit about more of the entire system. I
Yeah,
want to take some time to look at the legal system because that's what Rise
that's
works
what we
in, the
do.
legal,
Yep.
that's what we do in the legal
Yep.
system. I did mention protection orders earlier. I did say that it's going to be more than one episode to talk about protection orders, but
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
I don't think I would be I think we would be kind of failing
Hmm.
our responsibilities if we didn't touch on
If we
why
don't just
prote
even touch on it. Exactly.
yeah, why protection orders just aren't working. And
Hmm.
again, our colleague, the amazing Haley Rymack, did a research report on protection orders in BC, and she identified a number of things that weren't working and made recommendations on why things aren't working.
Hmm.
And I'm not gonna list them out here. But one of the things that was a major problem was the time limit, the short time limit that was placed on
Right.
protection orders.
Yeah, the default was just too short, right? And anyone
Yeah,
who's been through the family system and has actually gotten to a conclusion of some kind will know that like 6 months or 12 months is just not enough time.
yeah. And I think this is one of the examples, Stephanie, you mentioned earlier, where Dr. Stanton acknowledges that, the legislation is there, the law is there, the law is good, but it's
Hmm.
just the practice of it. So there is
Yeah,
actually no requirement to put a time limit on the
right,
protection orders. And in fact, there is no barrier for people to seek a longer protection order or even an indefinite protection
right,
order.
right, which was
Um,
shocking to me. I had no idea that was already a possibility. It's just not what's done. So it
yeah, it's
feels
it's
like it's
not
not possible.
yeah, it's not explicit in the legislation. It doesn't actually
Hmm.
say you can ask for a protection
Right.
order that is 3 years. It doesn't say that. It just says if the protection order doesn't have a time limit, the default is 1 year. So if the
Right.
court doesn't acknowledge a time frame, it
Hmm.
will just expire in 1 year. But there's
Right.
nothing prohibiting people and the courts from ordering something that is longer than 1 year.
Yeah.
However, the we've seen the opposite is um we've seen protection orders that are shorter than 1 year, like
Right. Right.
for two
Exactly.
weeks or 6 months or
Hmm.
whatnot, which isn't working, especially when we take into account how long the legal system takes
Right.
to have things resolved. And also considering the fact that we've talked about it already, violence doesn't end upon separation. And in fact, it
Right.
continues for a while. And that 1 year is
Hmm.
perhaps not enough time for someone to achieve safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even suggest if someone has gotten to the point of coming to the courts to ask for a protection order, clearly they've been in an unsafe and threatened situation for quite an amount of time. And if the survivor is someone who believes in the legal protections that exist, which not everybody feels safe by a piece of paper that's signed by the courts, but some people do feel like this is really, really helpful. And when they feel that way, 12 months isn't long enough to relax. For all of the lead up, getting to a protection order, all of that stress, all of the worry, all of the fear takes time to come down again, to settle into a more calm and confident state of mind. So, yeah, I mean, the whole like family law system carrying on and moving forward aside, just settling into a more safe feeling takes time. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I do think it's lovely though to have it explicitly pointed out that there's nothing stopping anyone from asking for a longer um, time on their protection order. It already exists. It's already there.
Yeah.
We can encourage lawyers to go for it. Encourage survivors to
And
ask.
and nothing's stopping anyone from asking it, but also nothing's stopping the court from granting it either, right? So
Right.
we've
Yes,
got,
it all exists. Yeah.
yeah, I think the troubles that sometimes we see is folks, whether it's lawyers or unrepresented litigants, do ask for a longer one, but the response
Hmm.
sometimes is, mm-mm, you're not, we're not going to get
Right.
you the longer one. We'll have a short one and see what happens. And it's
Right.
very temporary in nature, which
Yeah.
um, oh gosh, we're going down the rabbit hole now, but
I
it
know
requires
we need a whole episode.
it requires people to come back to court often,
Yes. Right.
frequently. there's not
Right.
enough court time.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
we'll put the limited protection orders. We'll put a pin on that.
Put a pin in
Um,
it. Yep. We'll
but
come back to
maybe
it.
we can go to another topic about protection orders, which is the enforcement of protection orders. So you got
Yes.
one, it's valid for a specific number of time. And then what happens if the other person does not follow the protection order?
Right.
Um, so again, according to the legislation, it is considered a criminal offense to breach a protection order that's made under the Family Law Act. Um, but what we have seen from Haley's report is that there hasn't been successful enforcement of the protection order, such as um, folks not being it doesn't turn into a criminal proceeding, let's say. And I'm
Right.
not saying that
Yeah.
criminal proceeding is the answer to everything, but
No,
it
of
is
course
a
not.
mechanism.
But yeah, and it is the law that we currently have. Like the Criminal Code of Canada has that provision on purpose so that if there is a breach, it turns from a family law provincial level issue into a criminal issue. And that's done on purpose. It just in practice is really hard because again, because of the siloing, again, because of maybe the
Hmm.
lack of training, for police officers to be pulled into what they perceive as a family matter, all of a sudden, I mean, there's a lot that goes on between like within family matters leading up to the breach of a protection order. And that's when the police officer would get involved, is at that stage. And there's a lot to catch up on, and a lot of it doesn't fall under the criminal code. So I mean, the enforcement piece is a good idea and it already exists. So I feel like Dr. Stanton's report is doing a great job of saying, we have this lever. How do we use it properly? Let's
Hmm.
rethink it, while also understanding that the reason it's not working well is it's logical that it's not working well, but it's frustrating. And we are smart people. We can do better. We can analyze this and figure out a better way to use the existing laws without needing to rewrite legislation.
Yeah. And I think the lack of enforcement or the failure of enforcement is the reason why a lot of people, like you said, it's protection order is just a piece of paper. Like
Oh yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't do anything because if
Right.
there's no consequences for breaching the protection order, then what's the point of going to get one, especially when we look at the lack of resources, especially court resources, legal resources, asking
Emotional
someone,
resources.
yes.
Yeah, everything. Everything. Yeah.
Um, so, and I think along with the rest of the system, but particularly with the challenges to protection orders, is this underlying theme, or again, misbelief
Yeah.
about the Mrs. stereotypes for violence, right? And we touched on
Yeah.
this a few episodes ago as well about the Mrs. stereotypes. What are they?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it is pervasive throughout the entire system. But like the example that you said about police believing that violence is a private matter, it should just be resolved between
Mm-hmm.
the two parties. It's not um, like the police aren't there to interfere, quote unquote. I'm
Right.
using air quotes,
Yes.
interfere
Right.
in a violent situation. That is rooted in a myth.
Yeah, exactly. And I was so pleased to see the myths and stereotypes theme brought up in Dr. Stanton's report, because I think that gets to some of the like the underpinnings of our current dysfunction. We're
Hmm.
we're digging down deeper into why society behaves the way they do, why the systems are responding the way they do. And sometimes it's based on a myth or a misconception of how people should behave, about how things should operate, about what something
Hmm.
looks like from the outside. And so, yeah, I mean, having worked with police, I know that some officers will believe that that it's not their job to get involved in a family matter, but there are lots of officers that are willing to wade into the danger and it's a very dangerous
Mm.
territory because people's lives and safety are part of it, but they aren't necessarily equipped with the training or the background. And so myths and stereotypes actually, as a framing tool, are really good training for so many people who work within the legal system, whether it's in the family or the criminal side. I think
Hmm.
it's a really good thing to bring out into the open for us all to talk about, and it will help break down some of the barriers as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Dr. Stanton suggested that there actually be legislation to prohibit mis and stereotypes reasoning. And she provides an
Hmm.
example from a legislation in Quebec that lists out all these uh, factors that
Right.
people should not take into account when thinking about family violence or gender-based
Hmm.
violence and
Hmm.
and sexual violence. For example, one is like you probably shouldn't consider whether this person disclosed violence or when they disclosed violence or who they disclosed
Right.
violence
Right.
in
Right.
deciding whether the violence actually happened or not.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be something that is taken into that analysis.
Yeah.
Um,
Because it doesn't tell you anything about what really happened. There are so many
mhm.
reasons why someone would maybe not disclose or wait to disclose about something that happened, and maybe even their understanding, like we've talked about in previous episodes, of what violence actually is, changes over time, and until they recognize it, they're not going to bring it up. So
Yeah,
yeah, it should not be involved in the analysis at all.
yeah,
It doesn't give us good information.
no, yeah. And one of the like biggest, I think, very dangerous beliefs is that, oh, this person didn't go talk to the police. If they were really scared or if they
Hmm.
were really frightened, they would have gone to the police. But they're
Right.
so we've discussed why going to the police force on violence
Hmm.
is problematic for a lot of
Right.
people, where the police may not have been supportive of their community, of maybe they've had like a previous horrible experience with the police or they've
Hmm.
seen a horrible experience. And not saying all police officers are bad, but
Hmm.
there's a lack of trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are real limits to what police officers can do as well. And I think someone who does report something often sees the limitations and then recognizes that it makes them more unsafe to escalate to like a police
Hmm.
investigation. And yeah, it just could really compromise the very delicate safety that they've managed to establish in the privacy of the relationship or upon leaving the relationship. But escalating to police is definitely, yeah, it's an escalation, and that can make
Yeah,
someone just inherently unsafe.
yeah. So it's great that we have a roadmap, let's say, to for the how to prohibit myths and stereotypes, reasoning and
Hmm.
thinking, and how it. I'm really grateful to Dr. Stanton for acknowledging that it absolutely has no place
Right.
in the legal system when we're talking about supporting survivors in finding safety.
Hmm. Yeah, there are lots of great roadmaps that are provided in the report. I'm
Hmm.
really excited to see how the implementation goes because I definitely feel some of the effects of the report already. I mean, it's really been wonderful to collaborate with our current research with our provincial government. That's been very positive and encouraging. And I know there have been lots of kind of training sessions or information sessions that Dr. Stanton has been doing. She must be exhausted. There's a lot going on of letting people know and letting the different sectors that are impacted by the report know what's going on, what's in the report, and what does that mean. So I think we're going to have a lot to talk about in
Yeah.
the coming
Yeah,
year.
I Yeah, for sure. This is I think only the beginning, right? We don't, again, this is not the end. It's not a report that's going to sit on a shelf. So we should
Right.
all put our heads together, put our efforts together, collaborate.
Yes, let's collaborate. Great word. Buzzword. Yep.
Collaborate on how to make these changes become reality and work towards what Dr. Stanton has envisioned and the recommendations she has provided.
Hmm. Yeah, and like you've said, there's still lots of work to do. So I believe that also gives us lots of topics to talk about in a second season of the podcast. So
Yes.
when we were contemplating whether to wrap up this year or not in 2025, we thought, no, we still have a lot more things to look at and try to discuss in a way that everybody within the province can access and can hopefully listen to the podcast and just get a bit better understanding of maybe something they didn't know about before.
Hmm. So that's it for now. We're
That's
gonna
it for
wrap up
now.
season one and we'll be back with season two. Yeah, early springtime of 2026. We thank you everyone for again joining and tuning in to what we have to say. We really appreciate all your support and we'll see you in 2026.
Yeah, we're so grateful. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye for now.
Everything that we have said today is not legal advice. If you or someone you know needs legal advice, please consult with a lawyer. We want to acknowledge that this podcast would not be possible without the generous contribution by Women and Gender Equality Canada, Femmes et Égalité des Genres Canada.